You are listening to the Tudor History and Travel Show, Travel Essentials, the place to be for all the best top tips and inspiration for planning your Tudor adventures. So, let's get ready to hit the road with Sarah Morris, the Tudor Travel Guide.
Hello all my time travelling friends out there, it's Sarah the Tudor Travel Guide here, and welcome back to this month's episode of the Tudor History and Travel Show Travel Essentials, where we tackle some of your most pressing travel related questions. And of course I also highlight some of the up and coming events in the Tudor calendar. Well, before we get started today, I just wanted to acknowledge, of course, that May is a very important month in the Tudor calendar, particularly for those of us who are lovers of Anne Boleyn. However, here in the UK, it is also a very significant month because I believe it is on the 19th, the very anniversary of Anne's execution, that many of the cultural and heritage sites will reopen their doors. So once again, we'll not only be able to walk around grounds, but we will be allowed inside. And there is at least one very important event that I want to be talking about in relation to that. So stay tuned for the rest of the podcast. And it's just a reminder from me, of course, that this podcast is also recorded on video. And if you'd like to see a recording of it, then do head over to my YouTube channel. Just search The Tudor Travel Guide. And of course, make sure if you're there that you hit that subscriber button to keep up to date with all my latest videos. Okay, well, before we get into the meat of today, I also wanted to just give a shout out to a new Clubhouse room that I'm running. Now, I know I've mentioned Clubhouse before on my podcast. It's a new social media platform. It's 100% audio and it's live. And I am on there with three of my fellow bloggers and vloggers, including the regular guest of this show, Philippa Brewell from British History Tours. And we run a number of rooms under two clubs, the Tudor History Club and also the History and Culture Club. And I just wanted to let you all know that very recently we started a new Tudor History Club room on a Sunday at 4 p.m. British summertime. And that room is called Visiting Tudor Britain. And of course, it's very relevant to this particular podcast because it is all about getting out and about and visiting some of the best known and lesser well known Tudor or Tudor related locations in the UK. Now, I am joined in that room by, as I said, Philippa from British History Tours, but also Deb Royal from the Tudor Times. We all have a passion for Tudor places and between us have pretty much, I imagine, been to all the nooks and crannies around the UK and so have a wealth of, I hope, knowledge and inspiration to share with you. So if you are on Clubhouse, look out for that room, Sundays, weekly, 4 p.m. British summertime. And if you're not yet on Clubhouse, then do keep your eyes out on my social media channels. And more importantly, make sure that you subscribed to my blog at www.thetudortravelguide.com because from time to time, I send out emails where I have up to 100 invites to give away for anybody who just wants to drop into the room. And in fact, I'll be sending one of those emails out on a fairly regular basis. So do make sure you sign up and you get your chance to join us in Clubhouse where you can talk to us live. It's such fun. Okay, well, as ever, I'm going to be speaking in a moment to Philippa from British History Tours. And then I'll be inviting my second guest to the show to talk about their favourite Tudor location, a place to take rest and refreshment. And of course, I'll be rounding up this podcast with a couple of Tudor events which are coming up in the virtual and indeed the real world. But now it is time to get on with the show. So let me welcome our resident guide, and that, of course, is Philippa Brewell from British History Tours. And so with that, let's welcome Philippa back to the show. Hi, Philippa.
Hi Sarah, hi everybody. Thank you for having me.
We're having a bit of a giggle, aren't we? Really, because it's just one of those mornings where nothing is going right.
No, it's not quite going so smoothly this morning.
Anyway, let's forge on regardless and valiantly. So we're here to tackle another one of those, maybe frequently asked questions or things people might want to know more about if they're visiting the UK or travelling around the UK. So what are we going to be tackling today?
We're going to be tackling free museums or free places for people to go if they're interested in Tudor England. We're mainly focusing on London.
Yeah, mainly on London. Yeah, right. So, and there are quite a few to choose from. I think that's one of the really big positives actually about visiting the capital, because obviously if they were charging for some of these places, you would be quickly using up your budget. But thankfully, a lot of the major museums are free. So, where are we going to go to first?
Let's first pick out a museum, and I'm going to pick on this one because I think it's one that people don't realise has so much Tudor stuff, and that is the Victoria and Albert Museum, which is in Kensington. And there is a neatly packaged Tudor room there with fantastic artefacts such as Henry VIII's writing desk. The famous Holbein miniature of Anne of Cleves is there. There's a watercolour of Nonsuch Palace, that incredible palace that is totally lost to us. So there's lots of really interesting artefacts there, and it is totally free to go.
Marvellous. And I feel so ashamed to say this, I've never been. How could I not? I don't know. I've been past it so many times, but I've never been. Now, speaking of being past it, it's on the more towards the west of London, isn't it? Just geographically speaking.
Yeah. So in Kensington, you've actually got quite a concentration of museums. So it's the Natural History Museum is nearby as well. But it's quite well served by underground stations and buses, so it is out the way, but it's not too difficult to get to, and it is well. This is why I don't think it gets visited by Tudor fans as much, because it is a little bit out the way. It's not obvious that it's going to be of interest, but it is well worth going. The other thing they've got there, which isn't in the Tudor room, but if you ask when you get there, is the Wolsey angels. These are the angels that should have been on Wolsey's tomb and therefore should have been on Henry VIII's tomb, and then got sold off and spread out across the country, and the four of them are back together in the V&A Museum. So it is definitely worth a visit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going to have to put it on my itinerary. But the good, you make a point about travelling too, and I suppose most of the places, if they're not right in the heart of London, and a few of them are probably within walking distance, then the tube is probably the best way to get around if you want, I suppose, if you're on a budget or you want to get around quickly. If you prefer to see more of London as you go around and you've maybe got a few more shekels in your purse, then I suppose cab is the other way of doing it. I personally like going around in a cab because I'm just very nosy and I like to see the sights of London go by. But I don't know, what's your preference, Philippa?
Yeah, I suppose if money's no object, a cab is great because you get to see everything. And of course, you get to talk to the driver, who probably has some tales to tell you as well. The bus is also quite a good way of getting around, especially if you can get on the top of a double decker. And there are apps now to easily see the timetable and the route, because buses always confuse me with their route. You don't always necessarily know where you're going. But the tube, I suppose, is just the most simple way of working out, right, I just need to get to that station and then I get off and I'm there. But yes, and the bus and the tube are obviously the cheapest ways of getting around, but if you can afford it, a taxi's good too.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've noticed, I was in London just a couple of weeks ago, and the cab fare from the west of London over towards the city was about half the normal price. And I think that was basically, so you can expect, if you come into the west, I often drive into the west of London, so most people won't be doing this, they'll be coming from central London. But if you come from a station like Marylebone, which is my local station for getting into London, you want to get a cab over to the city, pre-COVID, that could cost you around £60, £50 or £60 in a cab to do that, largely because there is so much traffic and you spend quite a lot of time sitting around with the meter going round and round. But actually this time we got across London and it was about £30. So not so much traffic in central London right at the moment, but I'm sure that will change. Anyway, we're here to talk about museums. Where else might we go?
Okay, so let's talk another one that's a little bit further out. And we've got a different way of getting here, actually. This is somewhere that we both, I know, love talking about, and that's Greenwich. Now, Greenwich is, again, slightly outside of the city. The best way to get there, I know you're in agreement with this, is to get on the Thames Clipper, which is the boat, which it's actually a commuter boat. So it's you don't have to pay the prices for the pleasure boats, although I'm sure they're very good as well. But if you just literally want to get from A to B in the nicest way, I would suggest the Thames Clipper, and you can get on there at the Tower, you can get on there at Westminster. There's various different stops, and that will take you to Greenwich. And Greenwich is obviously the site of the Tudor Palace of Greenwich. And although there's little to see, if any, of the actual palace now, the history there is so rich. The birthplace of Henry, Elizabeth, Mary. Anne Boleyn was arrested there. Edward VI died there. It's massive, and there's a free visitor centre there. So Greenwich itself is lovely. You're in London, but you get that village feel, that you're slightly out of slightly into the countryside. You're out of the city. You've got Greenwich Park there, so nice big green space for picnics, hopefully, if the weather's lovely. And like I say, there's this free visitor centre which gives you fabulous information about what it did look like for the Tudors and what was there. Some of the artifacts they managed to find when they did some of the digs they've done on the site, pictures of those digs, because the things with archaeological digs is everything that gets put back on top, because that's the best way to keep it all preserved. So you can see all that and then go out into the space, and you've got a great way of imagining then what was there in Tudor times.
Yeah, it's definitely the way around to do it, isn't it? Go see the model of the palace and then wander out and just take it all in, and wander up the hill towards the observatory. You can look back down on the site of where the palace was. And that's been captured in some wonderful contemporary drawings to the 16th century. So Antonius van den Wingard, I think, captured the image of the palace while it was still standing. So you can go and stand almost on the very spot in which he drew that sketch, which I just love to do. So yeah, very good. Now, you were talking about the Thames Clipper, and absolutely, it took us 10 minutes to get from Greenwich to the Tower. That's how quick it is. It does stop along the way, as you were saying, Philippa. It's a commuter boat, so it's just like a water taxi, basically, isn't it? Yeah. I've also done the tourist boat, and the upside of the tourist boat is you get the running commentary about what you can see and what you would have seen in days gone by, and what you can still see today. So I suppose that's quite an interesting way of doing things. So yeah, love Greenwich. It's wonderful. Good. Well, let's move on. Where might we go to next?
Okay, so the next one let's talk about, because this is slightly linked to Greenwich at the moment for a very specific reason, the National Portrait Gallery. Now, this is a free, all of these free museums will have paid exhibitions, so don't get put off if sometimes you go and look on their website or you go in and it says admission charge. It'll be for a specific exhibition. So there's a free room in the National Portrait Gallery, the Tudor room, and it's got all the portraits that you would wish to see. Unfortunately for people travelling to London at the moment, it is closed from a major refurb and isn't open till spring 2023. But anyway, if you're coming after spring 2023, make sure you go to the National Portrait Gallery in the Tudor room, because it's fabulous. But the reason I say this is linked to Greenwich is because the Portrait Gallery is closed, the portraits are getting lent out. This is one of the advantages of some of these museums closing is the things that you normally have to travel to go and see start traveling the country, and you get to see them in different parts. And there's going to be a temporary exhibition at Greenwich of some of the Tudor portraits. So that's well worth looking out for. See if that's on if and when you go to Greenwich.
Yes, lovely. Yeah. So I would love to get down and see those three faces of Elizabeth. That's going to be amazing.
Yeah, so this is the three Armada portraits that they're. Is this the one you're talking about, that they're managing to bring together and put together side by side? So there is always the Drake version at the Queen's House, Greenwich, but they're getting the other two. Is there three in total or four in total?
Three in total. I think
three.
Yeah, three in total. Yeah.
And that will be fascinating because they do differ. So yeah. And I think that one's at the Queen's House. I'm not totally sure. Yeah. So, and then the other Tudor portraits will be an exhibition in Greenwich as well. So.
And I believe that exhibition opens literally in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, something like that.
So I might be able to come back and tell you more about it then, because I'm planning a trip to Greenwich in the next couple of weeks. So I will let you know.
Yes, maybe you can update us on our next travel essentials and give us a postscript to that.
Absolutely.
Well, while we're sort of down that end of London towards the East End, of course, there's the Museum of London, which is within the city walls and focuses on the history of London. And again, that's another museum that's in a bit of flux at the moment.
Yeah, so the Museum of London is supposed to be moving to new premises in Smithfield Market, literally in the old market buildings there. We're not exactly sure when that site is opening as opposed to the old one. We know that they're opening up again on the 19th of May. So we'd suggest looking at their Facebook pages and website to see exactly what's happening. But they have, again, brilliant. They've got a portrait of Henry VIII that you won't have seen probably anywhere else. They've got all sorts of different Tudor artifacts.
And they've got the Cheapside hoard, which is just amazing. Now, whether it's going to be on display or not, I'm not entirely 100% sure. I really hope so, but yeah, I don't know, because obviously Cheapside hoard obviously was a hoard of jewellery that was uncovered in the sort of 1920s in the basement of a house that was on Cheapside, and it was obviously abandoned by its then sort of early 17th century owner, and contains the most magnificent cornucopia of Elizabethan and Stuart jewellery. And I believe it's in the possession of the Museum of London. I saw it in an exhibition there a few years ago. But do you know if it's going to be on display at all in the new museum?
I don't know. I imagine they'll get the most famous stuff out first. But I think with any move, it's going to be interesting to see how it's different from the old museum and what they choose to put on display. I'm not sure that they have as much space, unfortunately, in this new museum, so we'll see. It might find that they rotate the collections more, so depending on when you go, you might see something slightly different. So, but because it's a free museum, it's going to be worth popping in if you're, even though if you've been before, go in again. There's probably stuff that they've put out that you might not have seen before. Or if you're like me, totally forgotten you'd seen in the first place.
They also, by the way, have one of the partner panels to the Anne of Cleves panels, which of course I was involved in helping rediscover in the old in the church at Old Warden, and we tracked one panel down, a lion's head panel that was in the possession of the Museum of London, although it was tucked away in a small cupboard in a small glass case. I don't think anybody really saw it, but I don't know whether that will make it into the light of day. But yeah, I feel like I've got a bit of a connection there.
Yeah, it's so worth really taking your time, isn't it, in these places? Because they have absolute gems.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which they're very used to just seeing. They're just there, and yeah, you can find some real gems, some surprises along the way.
Good. So where else? Because there are maybe 2 or 3 others we just should touch on.
Well, I've got one other that I would definitely want to suggest. It's got less Tudor stuff, which is why I've left it till the end, but it has got Henry VIII's, or probably one of Henry VIII's astrolabes, and that's the British Museum. I mean, the British Museum, like them all, is just a treasure trove. Now, with reopening back up at the moment, all of them are slightly different, obviously, setup. You need to book in advance, have time tickets, and there's probably going to be one-way systems in a lot of the places as well. But at the British Museum, especially when they get back up and running, I hope this will happen again, is in particular rooms, there will be talks, free talks by the curator of that room. And the timetables for these are always published on the website beforehand, and normally on signs on the day that you get there as well, so you can see. And they are superb, absolutely superb. So look out for those if you're going. See if you can catch one of these free talks, because you will learn so much. And suddenly these, pretty or interesting items on display suddenly have this whole story behind them,
right.
and context, and brings them to life. So definitely have a look. Hopefully, I don't think they'll probably have them on straight away this summer, because of all the other things that these places are having to do to cope with just getting open again. But
yeah,
if you're coming, have a look, because if you can catch one of those, they're really, really good.
well, fabulous. And actually, as we're sitting here, I'm thinking actually of at least two other places I'd just like to mention. One of them is outside of London. So if you are heading north and you happen to be anywhere near the northern city of Leeds, you might notice there is a Royal Armouries. Now, there's one Royal Armouries that's based at the Tower of London, but of course you've got to pay to get in the Tower of London. But the Royal Armoury at Leeds is apparently free, which is fantastic news. I haven't been yet personally, but I hope to actually at this point, some point this year, because the Royal Armoury contains at least 2 suits of armour associated with Henry VIII, who he took them to the field of cloth of gold. So it's a rather svelte Henry VIII. But I think they'd be very interesting to see, because if my memory serves me correctly, they are for different parts of the tournament. So the hand fighting and the poleaxe, etc. They require different types of armour. So I'm really quite interested to see those arms, and you can see them up at the Royal Armoury in Leeds. And the other one I was just thinking about, Philippa, actually, now this is for the Tudor connoisseur. This is for the ultra committed. If you really, really not only want to see, but literally touch Tudor history, and you have a bit of time, you could go to the archives at Kew, of course, which are free to get into. Now, you can order online to see original Tudor documents, letters, and so on and so forth. Now, the only thing to say is you do have to order in advance, and you also have to get yourself a reader's card, or you have to sort of pass an online test. And I think when I did it, you had to actually, when you arrived, you had to do half an hour of going through a multiple choice online, which showed you knew how to handle documents. And it was very straightforward, but it's just the time you have to put aside to do it. So there's a few hurdles to get over. You can't just waltz in and say, can I see the trial documents of Anne Boleyn? But if you've got the time and you're really committed to actually be holding letters from the characters we know and love in your hands, is quite something. Have you done that, Philippa?
I haven't, but I did have a look, because I've got my reader's card for the British Library, so I got that far. That's, in fact, that's another place does have a free exhibition. Not just Tudor. I mean, you've got the 2 Magna Cartas, and you've got all sorts in there. So it is definitely, that's also worth a little look into. But yes, I was actually looking at getting a reader's card for Kew the other day, and I think it is all online at the moment. They want to get, they want to open up back, get people in. So there's quite a bit of information on their website at the moment about how to do that. I think I was looking up and trial documents, actually, or how to get hold of them. That's why I was on there. So yes, definitely for the Tudor aficionado, and you will need, I would put aside, I don't know how long they let you in there for, but I'd put aside a day. And
I think once you're in, you can have them for as long as you like, unless you're good at reading secretary hand. Don't expect to be able to much sense of them, because I have stared at these documents and tried to decipher them, but obviously it's not written in very readable English, and there's a lot of abbreviations, but it doesn't matter in some ways, because just holding the vellum, the parchment in your hand is just mind blowing. So yeah, that's it. So now Kew, I've only ever driven to Kew from outside of London, and so there's a big clue drive. There's a car park on site. There will be public transport to get you there, but I've never been by public transport, so I'm not sure probably what the best way would be.
No, I'm afraid I don't either. So have a look.
But what I would say, just to your point, all these museums are opening mid-May, most of them are anyway. But I would always, at the moment, check their websites, because you do have to, they are limiting numbers, as you were saying, Philippa. So I will create a show page associated with this podcast, and we'll put the links to some of and all of the museums that we've talked about. So people will be able to just go along there, click and see what the latest updates are. Good. Well, I think that's probably it. Wow, I've really whetted my appetite now. I need to get back out there.
Yeah, makes you excited to go and see everything again, doesn't it?
Because you're heading into London, aren't you, on the 19th? You'll be at the Tower.
I am. I'm going to be at the Tower on the 19th of May. Obviously, that's the anniversary of Anne Boleyn's execution. So yes, I'll be there.
And I was mentioning at the top of this episode about the new clubhouse room visiting Tudor Britain regularly on a Sunday. But of course, I think you're hoping possibly to do a live clubhouse room from the Tower of London on the anniversary of Anne Boleyn's execution.
Yes, that is the plan. Signal, noise and rain, or hopefully if the weather's nice, we'll be outside, because I think that will probably be the only place we can do it. And yes, and yes, do a live clubhouse. So unfortunately, we don't have a time set, but yes, that is definitely the plan.
So the thing would be is to get on Clubhouse if you can, and to get yourself on the Tudor History Club, follow the club, and then when Philippa or Kat and Catherine go live on there, you'll get a notification and see that they're on live, and you can join them at the Tower. Okay, well, have a lovely time, and I look forward to hearing all about it. And I'll see you again in June for our next slice of visiting Tudor Britain.
Yes. See you next time. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Well, that's so much to take in, isn't it? There's so many wonderful places to go to, and I hope that's given you some inspiration for any forthcoming trips. But now it's time to move on to the next part of the show. So let me welcome this month's guest. Hello, it's Katie Marshall. Hello, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's a delight. It's a delight. Now, before we get into talk about sort of your top place to visit and take rest and refreshment that's literally dripping with history, tell us about yourself, Katie.
Well, I'm a 20-year-old historian. I've been in love with Tudor history for many years now, and researching lots of different aspects and people. And I've always loved stories from history and getting to know historic characters, really, and how events happened. But alongside my history, I'm also a classical soprano. I performed in around the country and overseas for many years, so I like to combine the two, and it's meant that I've been able to perform in a lot of historic locations, which is a really fantastic aspect as well.
Oh, how wonderful. Where was your favourite?
Well, Rochester Cathedral is one I've performed at a couple of times. It's steeped in history. It's amazing acoustic, and that's always something you judge as a performer, but that's an amazing place to perform. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Now, you've had a particular interest in Mary Queen of Scots, don't you? Because you wrote a wonderful blog about the early life and places to visit, which has been very popular. So tell me a little bit about your love for Mary. Where did that come from?
Well, I think that I sort of got to know her through that kind of Tudor lens that I think a lot of people are introduced to her through, of that sort of Catholic conspiring rival to Queen Elizabeth I. But I really wanted to get to know Mary behind that, and I found a character that is very complex and emotional. You see her emotions come through in her letters and her actions quite a lot, which is quite unusual, and it can be really touching. So that's something I really connected with, and I wanted to find out more about her, so my love for her sort of grown from there, really.
She drew you in.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. A lot of these historic characters do that to us, don't they? Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Well, I will make sure I put a link to your blog in the show notes associated with this podcast. So if anybody wants to check out Katie's writing about the early places associated with Mary in France, then please do just look on the show notes. But now we are here to talk about perhaps one of your favourite historic locations, or somewhere you've been to quite recently that maybe you can inspire us to go and visit. So where are we talking about?
We're talking about a stunning Elizabethan manor house situated in the Midlands in England. It's very near Worcester, and it's not very far from Birmingham, so it's very essential and very accessible, even though it's in beautiful countryside. It's called Harvington Hall, and some of you may have heard about it already because it's been quite present on social media throughout its restoration of it recently. But mainly it was built in the 1580s. The centre block dates back even further to the 14th century. But it was in the hands of Sir John Packington, who was a lawyer under Henry VIII, and his great nephew Humphrey built the house that stands today. And it's really stunning and has a lot of very intriguing features.
It certainly does. It's an unusual house. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what makes it just so unique?
Oh, there are so many things, but I think what's really important is to note that when you think of Tudor, where to visit in England to do with Tudor history, you sometimes mainly think of the royal residences like Hampton Court and places like that. But what's really special about Harvington is that its very walls are testament to the darker side of Elizabethan politics. I think that it's infamous for its priest hides or priest holes. There are 7 of them, which is more than any other house in England. And there could have been even more because half the house was demolished in 1700. And these were places for priests to hide at the very last minute after the mass was outlawed and Catholic priests were encouraged, if not forced, to leave England. So if a priest hunter came, this was their last resort to hide in there for as long as they needed to. And I actually went in one when I visited Harvington, which was an amazing experience to really sort of think about what they must have been going through and the terror.
Which one did you go to? Because I've been to Harvington myself, and Phil has given me a lovely tour of there. Which one did you dive into?
I went into the one in the bookshelf. So they would have covered it all with books, so no one would know it was there. But one that I really love also, which I wasn't even expecting to see, was one under a staircase. You really just wouldn't know that was there, and I think that's the whole point and the genius of Nicholas Owen, who a lot of these priest hides have been attributed to.
It's a really fascinating house, isn't it? I mean, yes, I think it's unique. It's unique in sort of it's very different in how it appears when you go through into that central courtyard. Very unusual tower block, and then you've got all these internal priests. I just wonder if you didn't know where they are, and if you were, today, if nobody pointed out where they were, would you be able to find them? I think not, don't you?
I don't think so. I think they're just entwined into the fabric of the house so well, and they're just like ingenious as a mental vision. I think that they work with the house so well, and think that's just sort of an amazing feature. And it's also got these wall paintings that date back to 1600, a lot of them, and it's for you as much as the tour guides to sort of work out what they all are. You see an arm here, a leg there, a nymph or a biblical scene, so they're all so vivid still, and you can't imagine how astonishing it must have been to walk in seeing all those colours in that house when they'd just been done.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. Now, just for those people listening, if you haven't listened to some of the earlier episodes of this podcast, I did visit and had a lovely tour with Phil Downing, who's the house manager there. And so if you wanted to go on, kind of be a fly on the wall in a tour of Harvington Hall, again, I'll put a link to that podcast in the show notes description. It's an awful lot of fun. But now you're going to also talk about one of my favourite things, Katie, and that is when you've looked around a historic house, going and having some tea and cake. God, tell me, because there's been changes. You say there's been some renovations there at Harvington. So what could we expect on that front?
Well, the Elizabethan Malt House, which is also completely original to the original build, has been turned into a cafe. So it's open for lunch, coffee. It's run by this catering company, so it's got some lovely homemade bread and local produce. So you definitely sort of are in for a whole day out when you visit Harvington, so you can sit in the gardens with your lunch or your coffee. And it's also got a lot of sort of environmentally friendly packaging, which I thought was fantastic too. So it's all in all kind of a great place to visit, and sort of it's an all-in-one really. You really get the experience.
It is, and it's got that lovely moat, hasn't it? And there's lots of ducks around who'll no doubt come and quack at you and ask for bits of your
I
bread
think the
or
ducks
cake.
just had ducklings as well.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. So, how do you think people best get to Harvington? What would be your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that it's about half an hour in the car from Worcester itself, and also half an hour from Birmingham in the opposite direction. So I think you would need a car, ideally, to get there, because it is in the middle of countryside and down some lanes.
I agree. I mean, sometimes we say, oh yeah, you can get the bus or the train, but this place is in the middle of the countryside, so you probably do need a car to get there.
Yeah, you could get sort of a train or something into one of the main cities, and then possibly get there in a taxi or something from there, because it isn't very far.
Okay, well, thank you so much for this just little dollop of inspiration about Harvington Hall. But before we go, what are you going to be up to? What's your sort of plans for the next few years?
Well, hopefully I'll get more chance to study history, and also alongside my singing, but I've got a few ideas, but no sort of solid plans yet. So hopefully I'll be able to let you know quite soon what my plans are.
Well, you might
hopefully I'd just like to start writing and things.
Oh, lovely. So we need to look out for you, don't we, for when you start producing your books and getting on telly. A historian of the future, ladies and gentlemen. But you are on social media, aren't you, Katie?
Yeah.
So if people want to connect with you, where could they do that?
Well, I've got a dedicated history Twitter, which is Katie and then half HALF and then 1533, and that's also connected to my music Twitter, so you can check that out at the same time if you'd like. But that's where I do all my history things, but I've also on Instagram as well.
Lovely. Well, again, I can put some links so people can easily catch up with you. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out to come and talk to us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Lovely to talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.
So that was the delightful Katie Marshall sharing with us one of her historic and Tudor loves. Well, that brings us to the final part of the show, where I share with you some up-and-coming events that you might be interested in tuning into. This month we have one virtual event for you to enjoy, and then a couple of in-person events, one of which is a reminder. Well, first of all, let me start with the virtual event. Well, there is a virtual tour running on Sunday the 30th of May between 6:30 and 7:30, and that's British summertime, and it's called Tudor Turmoil in the City of London, and it's run by Kevin Larder. And basically Kevin is focusing on the years of religious upheaval when Henry VIII turned religious life upside down in the country and indeed beyond that. And he's going to take us on a tour of some of the significant sites which are associated with that religious turmoil. And apparently, by the time we finish the tour, we will have seen the oldest parish church in the city, Stationers' Hall and Tower Green, amongst many more. So this event is being held online on Eventbrite, and I will put a link to the event should you wish to sign up in the show notes associated with this show. And then I want to move on to something else entirely different, and this is something that's going on in the real world in Greenwich, and it's an exhibition called Faces of the Queen. Now, as you heard Philippa say earlier on in this show, the National Portrait Gallery is currently closed, and this has allowed a unique opportunity for 3 portraits associated with Elizabeth to be gathered in one place at Greenwich. The Armada portraits are the portraits in question, and all 3 are lined up side by side in Queen Anne's house. part of the old Royal Naval College at Greenwich. Now, the exhibition opens on the 17th of May. It's open daily and it's free, folks. Yay! But you do need to book your tickets in advance, as you do for so many of these venues at the moment, because they are strictly controlling numbers. And then finally, to wrap everything off, I just want to mention again that at Hampton Court Palace, the long-awaited Gold and Glory exhibition that was due to happen last year when it was the 500th anniversary of the Field of Cloth of Gold, well, it's now getting underway and everything kicks off on the 20th of May at Hampton Court Palace, and that exhibition runs through to the 5th of September. So if you are visiting London, then that definitely would be one to make sure you go and see. There are some fabulous treasures on show there, and I'm going to get a sneaky peeky glimpse of those at the press briefing just before the exhibition goes live. So look out, I may be doing a little bit of a post around that just to whet the appetite. Okay, and just to say that as far as the Golden Glory exhibition is concerned, the exhibition itself is free, but of course you do need to pay for entrance to Hampton Court Palace, unless you are a member of Historic Royal Palaces, of course, then you will get into both the palace and the exhibition free of charge. Okay, now I am done. I hope you've enjoyed that, and there's been loads of information to inspire you for your next visit. I want to thank you for joining me in this episode of the podcast, and of course, I will look forward to seeing you again in the beautiful month of June, where hopefully we'll be tackling another frequently asked visitors question, as well as talking about a favourite historic place to visit or stay and what's coming up in the Tudor calendar. Until then, don't forget you can link up with me on Clubhouse, regular rooms running through the week. You can find out more about those by subscribing to my blog at www.thetudortravelguide.com. All right, my friends, well, wherever you are in the world, you have a wonderful month, and I will see you in the Tudor sphere shortly. And until then, of course, it is, as ever, happy time travelling. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Now remember, if you've enjoyed the show, please do like, rate and subscribe to this podcast to spread the Tudor love. Until next time.